G'day. We are in Deuteronomy today, chapters 28 and 29. Now, we're going to look at chapter 28 today. And in this chapter, we have two, key themes: blessing and curse. 14 verses about blessing, 53 verses about curse. Now, if you've read it, you know what it feels like. It's pretty harrowing. And you would have maybe remembered that we read a similar list back in Leviticus 26. We read these lists and we don't really know what to say about them as modern people. But it is probably worth knowing that this kind of list at the end of a treaty was commonplace in the ancient Near East. When you got to the end of a treaty, you would talk about the blessings that would come from keeping to the treaty and the curses that would come from disobeying in the treaty. This is Deuteronomy. Not only is it 3 sermons, it is also a vassal treaty. It's a covenant between these people. And so let's have a look at the blessings first. I'll read some of them for you. This is verse 3 to 6. You will be blessed in the city and blessed in the country. The fruit of your womb will be blessed, and the crops of your land and the young of your livestock, the calves of your herds and the lambs of your flocks. Your basket and your kneading trough will be blessed. You will be blessed when you come in and blessed when you go out. Now, it's very obvious that the language of blessing here is a massive feature. And it should remind us of the early chapters of Genesis, particularly the creation story, where this language of blessing plays a massive role. But then we also see the language of blessing coming up again when God makes his promises to Abraham. Remember those promises? One commentator has said that this section in Deuteronomy is just like a detailed coloring in of the promises that God gave Abraham about the land. Now, the other connection that you have to Abraham's promises here, it comes in verse 10. Verse 10 says, Then, after all of these blessings, all the people on the earth will see that you are called by the name of the Lord, and they will fear you. So we have here this connection between the people being blessed and then all of the people in the world noticing the blessing and then calling on the name of Yahweh. Now, we need to remember back to Abraham, Genesis 12. Abram was blessed so that all of the nations on the earth will be blessed through him. So here we have the first step of this ingathering and salvation for the nations. They come to know Yahweh's name through these people. And this will all happen because of their holiness and their obedience to Yahweh. Their obedience will bring about the blessing, and the blessing will bring about the notoriety. We're going to come back to this idea in a second, this idea that the mission of God is connected with the ethics of God. Now, while all of this blessing for obedience, we need to keep this in the context of Deuteronomy. This isn't just be a good boy and you'll get good things. There isn't a sense here that the Israelites' obedience is earning their blessing. No, that's not how it's playing out here. Because they are because the blessings they experience aren't coming because they're good, they are coming because they are God's people. Israel is bluntly warned to make no equation between their military or their material success and their own merits. That's again and again the point throughout the book. Do not think that these things have come to you because of your own goodness or anything like that. We've heard that sort of thing many times in the book. Their obedience isn't earning their blessing. Their obedience is a response to the God who gives them the blessing. It's an important thing to notice at this point. Now, let's talk about the curses. We'll have a look at some examples. Have a look at verse 16 to 19. This is actually the reversal of what we just read in verses 3 to 6. You will be cursed in the city and cursed in the country. Your basket and your kneading trough will be cursed. The fruit of your womb will be cursed, and the crops of your land and the calves of your herd and the lambs of your flocks. And you will be cursed when you come in and cursed when you go out. Now, 4 quick things to say about these curses. Firstly, you might read this list as the kind of perfect storm of what could go wrong. It's Murphy's Law. Everything that can go wrong will go wrong. And you would be right. That's what this list looks like. But this isn't kind of make-believe. This isn't fanciful. This was the grim reality for ancient people, and still is the grim reality for many people today. And actually, if you keep reading through the Hebrew Bible, you will see that these realities are all things that come about for Israel. That's the first thing. Second thing, in this list, we actually learn about God reversing on Israel the blessings that he gave them through Abraham and when they were in Egypt. And so what we read in this list is actually just God winding back the promises and the goodness that he's already given them. Like they're told that they will actually return to Egypt and they will experience the curses, the plagues like the people in Egypt experienced. It's like God is undoing his goodness to them. In the same way that in Noah's flood was like God undoing his goodness that he brought about through the creation story. The third one, I think this one's kind of interesting. There is a concern through all of Deuteronomy about the people turning from God to idols. Now, the reason the people that turned to worshipping idols is because in the ancient world, worshipping ancient idols brought about blessings like rain and fertility and victory. That's what people believed anyway. But this is actually telling them that if they do turn from God to idols, they will not experience blessing. They will actually experience the opposite of those things. These curses are here to tell Israel that the end result of their choices to worship idols, it won't be a better situation. It'll actually be a far worse situation. And I think this is helpful for us to remember as well. Our sin can be the same. We choose it because we think it will be a better life than what God has promised us. But ultimately, it will lead to devastation. Adam and Eve, they experienced this in the garden. They thought the forbidden fruit, was going to be good. Ultimately, it led to their exile from the garden and their living in the wilderness. This is a helpful thing to remember in the midst of temptation. We think that life will be better on the other side of giving into sin, but we're actually handing ourselves over to something that is ultimately far worse. And I don't just mean eternally worse, I mean something that is worse in the here and now as well. We are left with the results of our sin. The fourth thing to say about these curses is that these really are conditional. These curses are not fated or destined. They are the results of Israel's choices. So we might read these and we might think, gee, God is quite villainous in these curses. You actually need to remember that God's desire is to bless Israel. These events will be the result of Israel's choices. Now, in verse 63, there's a verse that might confuse us because it says, just as it pleased the Lord to make you prosper and increase in number, so it will please him to ruin and destroy you. Now, I do think that this is being more rhetorical than it is being literal. God clearly doesn't want them to choose this path. Now, let's return to this idea that we were talking about before. The mission of God is connected to the ethics of God. Some people, they're all about evangelism, but they overlook holy living. Other people, they're all about a godly life, but they couldn't give a stuff about evangelism. You don't get to have one without the other. In the biblical story, the mission of God is connected to the ethics of God. The holiness of Israel was what brought the nations to them. Jesus says a similar thing. He said, you are the light of the world. Let your light shine before others so that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. So let's be people like that. Amen.